When I'm stressed, I turn to easy, delicious comfort food like pasta. And since it's April 2020 and we're likely all quarantined, I figured it'd be fun to share 3 easy vegan pasta recipes that you can make with ingredients you probably already have in your pantry. The first pasta recipe we're gonna make is a red lentil bolognese. And before you got here, I started soaking some red lentils, and soaking the lentils just helps soften them up a little bit so they'll They'll cook a lot quicker in the bolognese sauce than if you don't soak them. I'll put those aside for now, and the next thing you wanna do is mince up some garlic. So I've got 4 garlic cloves, and to peel the garlic, just put a little bit of upper body strength into it. One tip is after you've cut your garlic or minced it up, let the garlic rest at room temperature for 10 to 15 minutes if you have the time. That is going to help the garlic release the most antioxidants, so you're getting the most garlic bang for your buck. After you've chopped your garlic, we're going to do the same with an onion. We're gonna dice it up. I always hang on to these onion peels and leave them either in the fridge or in the freezer with other veggie scraps, because when you have enough, you can make some vegetable broth. I know it's a little difficult to find vegetable broth in some grocery stores right now, so this is a great way to stay prepared. When I dice an onion, one thing I always do is leave the root on. Kind of acts as an adhesive and helps to ensure the onion stays together instead of falling apart into a million pieces. So you're going to cut the onion vertically into strips until you hit the root, but not cutting through the root, and do that all over. And then you're gonna cut horizontally into the onion this way, and do that like maybe 3 times, again, towards the root, but not all the way. And then you'll just notice that when you slice through, you get these little pieces automatically until you get to the bottom of the root, and that root being in place helps this stay all together. In addition to the red lentils, one of the main ingredients in the bolognese are walnuts. I love adding walnuts because they add this rich earthiness. They're packed with umami, and of course they're so healthy for you. So I am chopping these walnuts very finely. If you don't mind a few extra dishes, food processor would be a lot quicker. It is a bit laborious, but I also hate washing dishes, like more so than laborious chopping.
You doing all right?
No, my arm hurts. Should have used a food processor. All right, that took a little longer than I thought, but now it's time to head over to the stove and get started on this bolognese. I've got some olive oil heating up in a large pan here, and once it's shimmering, I'll add the onions, but make sure your pan is nice and hot, because if you don't get it hot enough, your onions won't get that nice, beautiful golden brownness goodness about them. I'm gonna add just a pinch of salt right now to season the onions. We'll add more salt later. And we'll let these brown for a few minutes, and then once the pan starts to develop a fond on the bottom, which is that brown kind of sticky stuff, we'll add a few tablespoons of water to deglaze, and we'll cook them down until they're nice and soft and brown. Onions are soft and browned, so now I'm gonna add the garlic as well as some dried oregano and thyme for flavor. I normally love using fresh herbs, as you guys know, but dried herbs are obviously more convenient, so that's what I'm gonna do. And I'm also gonna add some salt and pepper.
How long do you let all this cook for?
We're gonna let the garlic and herbs cook for just a minute, maybe 2 minutes, 90 seconds kind of thing, to get some color on the garlic. Next step, I'm gonna squeeze in 1 whole tube of tomato paste. And I think a lot of recipes just tell you to add tomato paste in with all the other ingredients, but if you wanna get the most flavor out of your tomato paste, it helps to kind of saute it in the same way you would garlic. It's gonna help caramelize it a little bit. It's gonna release more flavor, more of that potent umami concentrated tomato flavor. If you feel like things are gonna start burning, just lower the heat or add a couple spoons of water. If you don't have vegetable broth, you could use water. It obviously won't have as much flavor, so you might wanna use a little more salt. I've deglazed the pan with the broth, so now I'm just gonna add the red lentils, which have been soaked in water for about 30 minutes. You could soak them longer for like 60 minutes. And I'm also adding the crushed walnuts. We're gonna bring this mixture to a boil and simmer at a rapid simmer for like 20 minutes. And now I'm gonna add some crushed tomatoes. You could also use diced tomatoes. It will be a little bit waterier. Watery is not a word. Less. If you use diced tomatoes, it'll be more watery. With crushed tomatoes, you can add a little bit of water along the way as you go in case it gets too thick. So just kind of keep an eye on it as you go. I'm adding some penne pasta, but any kind of pasta you like will work. If you want to do like the Italians do, they typically serve bolognese with a flat long pasta or a short pasta like penne. But again, use what you have because quarantine cooking is supposed to be about what you have in your pantry. The bolognese is done cooking and you could serve as is, but my favorite trick for finishing a pasta sauce is to add a little bit of balsamic vinegar at the end. I want to emphasize that it should be a good quality balsamic vinegar, channeling my inner Ina Garten here. If you use like a cheap $2 balsamic vinegar, I wouldn't use it at all. Maybe just a tad of brown sugar or coconut sugar instead. But the sweet acidity is going to really nicely balance the tomatoes and the lentils and the walnuts, so a little bit goes a long way. So good. It's meaty, but not like meaty in your face. It's really hearty and delicious. And now we're gonna get started on our second recipe, which is for a creamy, smoky pasta. So let me show you how to do that. Chop, chop, chop. Chop, chop,
You
chop.
have a huge piece of onion in your hair.
Where?
Further down.
This next recipe is a quarantine cooking favorite around here. It's a creamy pantry pasta. I don't have a better title for it than that, but it's sort of like a fettuccine alfredo with a little bit more interesting flavors, a little smoky. And I'm starting it the same way I did the other recipe with some chopped onions and minced garlic. It might sound a little boring to start the recipes the same way, but garlic and onion add a lot of flavor at the beginning, and I'm trying to keep these recipes as simple and pantry friendly as possible. And before I started chopping the onions and garlic, I put some water on the boil for the pasta. Everything cooks at the same time, so it's less than 30 minutes. It's a low effort, high reward recipe that I think you'll love. To start our creamy pantry pasta, I'm going to heat up a little bit of olive oil in a large, deep skillet, and we're gonna use medium-high heat. In go the onions. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. I have a big jar of salt like this. I always add a pinch of salt to my onions when I first add them because it helps them brown more evenly, helps them cook down, it releases the moisture from the onions, so you have less watery onions and more browned onions. You want to wait until the onions get a little bit of brown color on them, and then we'll add the garlic and the dried thyme. While the onions are cooking down, we'll get started on the sauce. It's very simple. I've got some vegetable broth here, and we're going to kind of make an instant roux, and I'm using 2 tablespoons of flour. If you're gluten-free, you could use gluten-free all-purpose flour, maybe even rice flour, or you could use cornstarch, but you'd want to use half the amount. And now I'm just going to take this very adorable tiny whisk and whisk this all together until it's smooth. Salt the pasta water, always. I'm using linguine today, but really this pasta sauce goes with any kind of pasta shape, so whatever you like. We're going to pour in this mixture, which is the vegetable broth, tamari, and flour. It'll thicken up pretty quickly. And now it's time to add the rest of the ingredients. This is our creamy oat milk, but again, coconut milk or something else is also fine. I'm also adding a spoon of tahini. This is gonna add some extra rich creaminess to the pasta. I absolutely love tahini in savory and sweet dishes, and it's delicious. I'm also gonna add some nutritional yeast for those cheesy flavors. I don't have a tablespoon, but I think there's a tablespoon left in here, so I'm just gonna dump it in. Got some salt, obviously, black pepper. For the smoky part, it comes from smoked paprika. If you don't have smoked paprika, it won't be smoky, which is fine. If you have regular paprika, you could add that. You wanna let the sauce simmer for 5 minutes, maybe 8 minutes over medium-low heat until it gets really nice and thick, and then we'll add the hot cooked pasta directly to the pan. The pasta is al dente, so I'm gonna drain it and then we'll add it to our sauce. In goes the pasta. Time for a taste test. Cheesy, smoky, creamy, everything you like. Really recommend you try this pasta out. This final dish is for a brothy pasta. It's kind of a crossover between a soup and a pasta, and it has some white beans in there. It's a bit similar to the traditional Italian dish pasta e cece, and we're gonna use a short pasta for it. This is orecchiette, but you can use any short pasta. I feel like my Italian accent is getting a lot of work in this recipe. And I'm gonna start by chopping up some shallots. For this recipe, you want 3 medium shallots or 2 large shallots. In addition to the shallots and garlic, 2 other flavor boosters we're gonna add, which are optional if you don't have them, but I really love using them, is rosemary. We're just gonna use a whole sprig of rosemary, no need to chop it. If you don't have fresh rosemary, you could try dried rosemary, though I don't think it's quite as pungent. And we're gonna use some dried chili peppers. If you don't have dried chili peppers, you could just use crushed red pepper flakes. The next part of the recipe is my favorite part. We're gonna take some whole peeled tomatoes and crush them up with our hands using a half of a 28-ounce can. We're just gonna get right into it, which is why I'm wearing an adult-sized bib to prevent all the splatter from getting on my clothes. It's so squishy. Ooh. Do a little dance, crush a little tomato. Come film this so you can see all the smushy, gushy stuff. As I mentioned, this is gonna be a brothy pasta with white beans. We're gonna use half of the white beans in the pasta itself to be whole, and we're gonna use the other half to make kind of a white bean puree to thicken up the soup, to thicken up the pasta, the soup pasta, to thicken up the pasta soup.
Is it a stew?
It's not a stew, it's a soup pasta. It's a pasta soup. And to the puree, I'm going to add some plant-based milk. This is oat milk. I always have that in my fridge, but light coconut milk or full-fat coconut milk, if you water it down, also works. Or another creamy plant-based milk like cashew milk or soy milk will also work. I've got some nutritional yeast for a little bit of cheesy flavor, a little bit of sea salt. I got some pepper. And this last ingredient is optional if you don't have it, but it's miso paste, like a white mellow miso paste. Although I do think this is a good time to stock up on miso because it has an indefinite shelf life in the fridge, so it really won't go bad. And now it's time to blend it all up. And now we're just going to give it a little bit of a taste test. Where's my spatula? Ah, here. I think I could use a little more salt, so we're gonna add a little more salt. It's better with the salt, but it's still missing a little something.
You forgot to add the lemon.
Oh, I did. Oh, you have a lemon for me. Oh, wonderful. I forgot to add the lemon, so I'm gonna zest maybe a half of a medium lemon, and maybe half of the juice as well. Just squeezing it over my fingers to catch all the seeds. It's much better. Sometimes if your recipes are a little lackluster, a pop of acid, acidic ingredients, can go a long way in freshening it up. For this final recipe, you don't actually need to bring a pot of water to boil for the pasta. We're gonna cook it all in this one pot. And the first thing you wanna do is heat up some extra virgin olive oil over medium heat, and we'll saute our shallots until they're nice and golden. You wanna stir these pretty often so that they don't burn. Shallots are pretty delicate. They're quite beautiful. So now it's time to add our garlic. And again, stir pretty frequently so that the garlic doesn't burn. You wanna cook the garlic until it's softened, 2 minutes, 3 minutes at the most. And then we're going to add a few other flavoring agents, our rosemary, bay leaf, and a dried chili pepper. We'll saute these for about 30 seconds, and then we'll add the white beans and the tomatoes. I'm also gonna add some salt to season. We'll cook this mixture down until the tomatoes have thickened a little bit, take anywhere from 5 to 8 minutes. Then we'll add the white bean puree, some water, and finally the pasta. The tomatoes are nice and thickened now, a little bit jammy, so it's time to add some water. I'm using 3 cups, and our white bean puree. And this is gonna help thicken it naturally. I'm gonna pour in the water, bring this mixture to a simmer over medium-high heat, and then once that comes to a simmer, we'll add the pasta. It should take about 12 to 16 minutes depending on the pasta variety and shape you've used. And stir the pasta occasionally to prevent it from sticking. This has been cooking for about 14-15 minutes, a little longer than the cook time on the package. So the broth is really flavorful, brothy, but thick and rich and creamy and all these good things. And I'm gonna remove the chili pepper, the rosemary, and the bay leaf. Where are you? Time has come. Your services are no longer needed. To finish this dish, I'm gonna add some fresh chopped parsley on top. If you don't have it, no big deal, just omit it. And then a drizzle of extra virgin olive oil. This is pretty outstanding. It's got this really nice bold rosemary flavor. The broth is thick and creamy from the white beans and the puree. Just all around comfort food. I know how hard it can be to come up with creative recipes using just a handful of ingredients, so I put together a short playlist for you to watch. It has some of my favorite pantry-friendly recipes that I think you'll like.